Okay, now let's look at some of the endocrine glands that we can locate up in the brain. First, let's take a look at our orientation here. We did osteology a while ago, so we can see the mandible here. We can see the hard palate. We can see the hypophyseal fossa, or the sella turcica. So this structure here would be the pituitary. Here is the medulla oblongata. This is the anterior arch of Atlas, posterior arch of Atlas. This is C2. This is the dens or the odontoid process of C2. And then here is the spinous process of C2. So you have the medulla, you have the pons, and then you have the midbrain. Back here is the cerebellum for balance and coordination. Medulla is really controlling your your cardiac rate and rhythm. The diameter of your blood vessels are controlled by the medulla. It's really neat because last week I had a patient who had very, very high blood pressure, was probably 180, and very atypical for him, but he had a major subluxation of his atlas. His C1 vertebra was sticking out to the right. We made an adjustment, rechecked his pressure, dropped 40 points. Dropped 40 points in less than 10 minutes. Tremendous. And we followed him a few days later and still held low. So the medulla oblongata does control the diameter of blood vessels. Within the medulla, you also have the nuclei of cranial nerves 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. And 10 is the vagal nerve. And that controls the heart, the lungs, the stomach, the kidney. It's about 90% of parasympathetics. Okay, up here is the cerebrum. The cerebrum has a frontal lobe, and it's got a parietal lobe, an occipital lobe, and a temporal lobe. All have different functions. What you'll notice is that the cerebrum looks a whole lot like the small and large intestine, right? We call it the brain-gut connection. Right? When you're nervous and anxious, you run to the bathroom, you have diarrhea. When you're depressed, you have constipation, right? They do go hand in hand, the brain-gut axis. And you do have this vagal nerve coming from the medulla that goes all the way down into the intestines, and it's a sensory nerve. So you can have bacteria and the communication of these bacteria from the vagal nerve into the brain. Okay, that's how coffee works. Besides the cortisol rush or the adrenaline rush that caffeine can bring from coffee, coffee actually creates a particular strain of bacteria which give a byproduct of a chemical messenger that drives up the vagal nerve to the brain for stimulation and alertness. Okay, so let's see what we have here. Up here is the diencephalon, which is here. Then you have the thalamus, and what do we call something that's below the thalamus? This would have to be the hypothalamus. Okay, then we have this connection from the hypothalamus into the pituitary gland called the stalk or the infundibulum of the pituitary. The infundibulum of the pituitary. And then we have the pituitary gland itself. Please keep in mind that if we divide this in half, there is an anterior pituitary and a posterior pituitary. Anterior pituitary is also referred to as the adenohypophysis. The posterior pituitary is the neurohypophysis because there's neurological tissue that you can see going from the hypothalamus into the infundibulum into the posterior pituitary. So they call it the neurohypophysis. And this sits in the hypophyseal fossa. So it's adenohypophysis, neurohypophysis in the hypophyseal fossa. Okay, now, really great slide. This kind of goes and coincides with what I was just mentioning, where you have posterior pituitary and anterior pituitary. Once you know the posterior pituitary, which is only two hormones, ADH and oxytocin, all the others have to be anterior pituitary. TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, prolactin, right, for lactation, prolactin, adrenocorticotropic hormone. So this adrenocorticotropic hormone, where is it going? The adrenal gland, or part of the adrenal gland. The adrenal gland has a cortex, which is the outer part, and the medulla, which is the inner part. Well, by its name, adrenocortico, it is going to go to the cortex of the adrenal gland, which produces glucocorticoids and mineralocorticoids. The glucocorticoid is cortisol, cortisone, corticosterone, and the mineralocorticoid, mineral would be for sodium, the mineral sodium, and it's aldosterone. Aldosterone allows the body to hold on to sodium. And if you hold on to sodium, you're going to retain water, and then that will help increase blood pressure. Then we have growth hormone, GH, growth hormone, LH, luteinizing hormone, and FSH, follicular stimulating hormone. The ADH, the antidiuretic hormone, it's actually stored in the posterior pituitary, but it's produced in the hypothalamus. Okay, and ADH, antidiuretic, well, you know what a diuretic does. A diuretic allows you to urinate, lose water. An antidiuretic is going to allow you to hold on to water, right? When you hold on to water, you hold on to minerals. When you let go of water, you release minerals. They go hand in hand. Oxytocin allows smooth muscle of the uterus to contract, and the smooth muscle of the male reproductive tract, the vas deferens, to contract as well. So here is a close-up look at the pituitary. Back here on this side is posterior, this side is anterior. So the posterior pituitary has these axons, you can see, that kind of goes from the hypothalamus down. Okay, back here is the pars nervosa, just lateral to it, more to the periphery, is the pars tuberalis. This is the pars intermedius. This is the pars distalis. This is the vestige of the Rathke pouch, right? That's kind of like a good division between the posterior and anterior pituitary. Here is the infundibulum, this section here, and then above it is the pars tuberalis. Okay, you can see the pars tuberalis here, and then the pars tuberalis here. Okay, now let's go back and see what we have. Here's the medulla, here's the pons, here's the midbrain, here is the cerebellum, here's the cerebrum. Could this little structure here be the suprarenal gland? No, that's kidney. Pituitary gland? No, that's in the hypophyseal fossa. Thyroid gland? That's in the throat. Thymus? That's near the sternum. This is the pineal or pineal. It's right here. Okay, it's kind of it's above the cerebellum and posterior to the thalamus. Okay, that is involved with melatonin, which helps tone you down at night. Okay, we'll take a break here.